Even those who aren't physicians or even in healthcare at all know that residency is a really, really challenging time for pretty much everyone, regardless of specialty. In a previous video, I talked about how I struggled to set boundaries when I was a resident, and that resulted in really complete sacrifice of my personal life for the many years that I was in training, which is clearly detrimental. And so what I had suggested in that video was that if people were a little bit better about setting those boundaries, then they might have a different and maybe better experience than I did. And so the question here is, well, how do you do that? And it's such a good question because there's a reason that people end up sacrificing so much so often during residency, and it's because we don't feel empowered to stand up for ourselves in any way. And part of that is because we're essentially told and taught that we shouldn't stand up for ourselves. That's part of the hidden curriculum in medical training. But I'll tell you one thing that changed everything for me, and it was a psychologist who we worked with in my residency program who I talked to about how I felt like I was giving so much on some of these rotations. And it was actually one rotation in particular that I was working more than most people did on that rotation. I was really just making sure that I did everything possible for these patients and that I communicated with everyone all the time and really did the best that I possibly could. And at the end of that rotation, my evaluations were not stellar. In fact, they were talking about like my posture on rounds. And so when I met with this psychologist, she asked me if I could do less. She said, I bet that your 100% is much more than what you need to be giving. Maybe your 80% is still going to be really, really good. What if you just gave 80% effort? And without going into detail, what I'll tell you is that I actually adopted that when I went back and worked with that same team at a later date. And instead of giving well over 100% of what I could give, I gave 80 or 90%. And they were wowed. They were so impressed by how I had turned things around. So that's the type of thing that I think you can do. You can try to not go above and beyond every single day in every single way, and recognize that there are other members of the healthcare team who are there to take over from you. And when you don't need to be there, you don't need to be there.